Experience hospitality the Northwest way at the Everglades Hotel. Located on the banks of the River Foyle, the Everglades Hotel is just minutes from the centre of Derry, Londonderry, with free on-site guest car parking. Whether you're here for a family meal, a big celebration, or simply a peaceful retreat, will make your experience as memorable as the sights in the city. Visit Everglades Hotel Derry for accommodation bookings, the latest menus, live shows and events, and much, much more. See you there.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Gaelic Lives. It's All-Ireland quarter-final weekend, and we're looking ahead to 4 big games in Croke Park this weekend. It's hard to believe that the season has come around so quickly to this stage. Thankfully, I'm joined on the line by former Kerry player, former Kerry manager, Éamonn Fitzmaurice. More recently, Éamonn Fitzmaurice of the FRC side of things to give us a look and how things have went. Éamonn, thanks a million for jumping on the podcast. Good to chat again.
Hi, Matt. How's the farm?
All good, all good. I suppose we've touched base a few times during the year at the FRC about just rules and what way we see things. What's it like being one of the members of FRC and seeing what's happening? I'm sure there has to be a sense of, I suppose, satisfaction or maybe at times frustration where things need tweaked. But what's it like on the inside?
Yeah, look, it's been a great experience, to be fair, and last year, obviously this time last year, we put in an awful lot of work trying to come up with the proposals and all of that, and trying to test them in those challenge matches, sandbox matches, and then this year it's seeing it play out, and we were always conscious that there would be probably need for adjustment, and while at the same time appreciating, obviously, if you're inside in the middle of it as a player or as a manager, that's not ideal. But no, it's been enjoyable for the most part. We've been watching on, and we obviously have a critical eye on every game that we're looking at from the point of view of seeing how the proposed rules that were brought in, how they're impacting the game. Are they working? Are they being implemented? Is there room for maneuver? Do we need to adjust it and all of that? So we're still meeting regularly online. We haven't had as many of the in-person meetings this year so far, but we'll be having a few of them post inter-county season again to make sure we're ready for special congress in early October. But it's been busy, but it's been enjoyable, and in general, it's been hugely positive, and the adjustments have definitely had a positive impact on the game and the way people are enjoying the game. So that of course is satisfying.
Yeah, I know personally I love it now, albeit there has been tweaks, and I suppose that has been the important thing. Coming from somebody who's not in the FRC, I think that's been very important that you have made the tweaks, no more than the one at the weekend there where the 50-metre penalty on the mark at midfield, and I suppose people have to realise that you were handed a difficult enough brief in the fact that it was very much a working environment, because there was league points up for grabs and there was places in the last 16. Like it was difficult from that point of view, I suppose.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the thing you're trying to balance the whole time, that we have to take into account that there's competitions going on and you don't want to be, interfering too much. But then on the other side of it, like we've been given a brief that this year is a kind of a trial year, if you want. And, that we have to try, I suppose we have a window to try and get the thing as right as we possibly can. And then, post-October, that's the end of the FRC, and the game will move on as it always does. So we're conscious of that as well, because, when you've been given that brief, there is a good bit of responsibility. And the other thing then that you're trying to balance is that, sometimes things that might be an issue for a weekend or two, and there's a bit of hysteria about, you have to give it space. And, sometimes, like early in the league, there were issues with things, but as it bedded in and as time went on and people got used to it and the players and coaches adjusted, they've worked out fine. So there's kind of balancing knee jerk versus a necessity to make a change. And, as you mentioned, especially at this stage of the season now, you don't want to be adjusting things too much, considering that we're really into the high stakes stuff at this stage.
And I suppose very quickly before we move on to the county season, what have you noticed club-wise? I know I was at a club match myself last week, albeit there wasn't an awful lot up for grabs, but there was no 3-on-3 infractions is what I was looking out for as probably, Éamonn, it was probably the most important change, but it was probably the most difficult one at club level, I feel. But I was chatting to Rory Kavanagh, who was managing Glen. He did say to me he felt that the players are policing it themselves in a lot of cases. So,
yeah, to be honest, that's the way I felt it would work out, Mal. That it would work out as in self-policing, and the game where the referee is there on his own, and like he can't be watching the tree up the whole time because he's to referee the game. But if he gets a shout, he's going to look back, and if there's an obvious infraction, as sometimes there can be, where a player gets lost and they run back with everyone else, well, he's going to give the free, and that's all you can do. It's I likened it. I'm not sure if it's the best comparison, but again, the referee that's there in his own, and if a fella gets a belt of a fist off the ball, unless he sees it, there's nothing he can do about it, even if it's obvious that there's a guy in the ground and he's injured and everything else. If the referee hasn't seen it, there's not a whole pile he can do about it. But similar to your experience, that's what I've seen in Kerry, that for the most part, it has worked out quite well. There's 10 rounds of the county league played in Kerry now at this stage, and a lot of the games have worked out well. Now, there has been little issues, and some of them have been around the tree up, where someone starts shouting from the sideline and the referee can get confused and give a free, and it turns into a 2-pointer, and that can be costly in the game. But as the leagues have gone on, I think everyone's got used to it. And I think from the club point of view, they're all watching the inter-county games as well, be it referees and players, managers. So everyone's learning from each other, and I think that's positive. And look, the huge thing that we're kind of seeing all over the country is just the dissent with the referees and the constant challenging every decision and all of that. There's been a huge impact in that, and that referees now are, that they're enjoying refereeing the games, and not every game is a battle for them and every decision is a battle. So that has been definitely a big positive, and it's great to see that trickling down to club level as well.
And without going into too much detail, Éamonn, because with 3 big games to sort of get into, what's your sort of summary been of 2025 league and championship so far? Like, it's obviously been higher scoring, but is there anything that you've noticed more than anything else?
No, I just think I suppose the games have been more open, and I think the thing that I've enjoyed, Mal, is watching everyone coming with their own versions of the new rules. And I think we're only scratching the surface. I think that depending what's adopted next October, I think we'll see more and more. If anything, I actually think the club championships this year are going to be fascinating, because a lot of those teams are going to be a bit further down the road in terms of innovation and in terms of what they're watching. Sometimes the inter-county season, particularly for the teams that have gone through the preliminary quarterfinals, the games are coming so thick and fast. It's hard to have time on the training pitch to innovate, particularly around kickouts. I would have expected a bit more innovation around the kickouts, but I think we will see that in time. But I've really enjoyed watching the different approaches, the different defensive approaches, the teams that have gone man-and-man, the teams that are defending zonally. Will that zonal defence transfer to Croke Park? And probably just there's been a good bit of variety to analyse, whereas last season in particular, I thought it was very much a one-size-fits-all. There was very little difference between any of the teams, that it was that everyone kind of attacked together and everyone defended together, and there was very little shape in the game other than that. So that's been, I found that very enjoyable. And I suppose the other big thing that's jumping out is that, again, in last year's championship, the kind of the marquee forwards, it was tough for them to operate in those environments, whereas we're seeing the re-emergence of the marquee forwards again, where they're really entertaining week in, week out, because of they just have a bit more space and they're getting the ball a bit quicker and they're able to show us all what they can do.
Yeah, I remember people talking about, I can't believe we're taking away what the goalkeeper can offer. And I was thinking to myself, what does a Conor McManus now feel like? Welcome to my world for 10 years, and now you have a chance. So I suppose looking into the weekend, Kerry and Armagh is obviously a clash. The champions versus your own county. I'm thinking back. I don't remember you managing against Armagh in the championship, but you had 2 big years against them. Was it 2000 in the replay, and obviously 2002 whenever you're on the other side of it? What's the sort of memories from back in those times? Because that was probably before the blanket came in.
Yeah, no, I always loved playing Armagh, to be honest, Mel. We great battles back in that kind of period. We played and the semi-final, draw and replay in extra time in 2000. We won that in the replay and went on to win the All-Ireland. The 2002, Armagh beat us in the final. There was 1 or 2 league games in between. There were always great battles. We would have played in challenge games actually a bit back around 2000, 2001 as well. And obviously in 06 then we played them in the All-Ireland quarter-final as well, and we won that day. So we had a great rivalry with them, and they were a fantastic team. There's I never managed against them, I'd say. I didn't even in the league. We were just in different positions. But I've always liked the Armagh style of football. For a lot of the time, I suppose the county team would have played quite similarly to the way Crossmaglen played. But recently, they've definitely, over the last couple of seasons, like I'd say after 2022, Kieran McGeeney seemed to make a decision that they were going to change their style of play. They were quite swashbuckling in the way they played, even up to 2022. But he obviously felt it wasn't getting the job done, so they became much more tactical, much more. They're seriously well coached. They've every situation kind of rehearsed and practiced, and they've obviously in the intervening years they were quite close, and then they won the All-Ireland last year, and I think they've gone on to another level again this year. I always felt, even though they were probably the most vocal group, understandably so, initially about the new rules. They didn't really want to see any new rules coming, which you could understand having just won the All-Ireland. But I always felt myself that looking in from the outside with the quality of the players they had and how adaptable they were and the quality of their management team, I felt they would be to the forefront of the new rules as well, which has been the way it's panned out. And I've seen them getting better and better throughout the year. Now, having said that, they have lost 2 games in the championship. But the key difference I'd see with other teams is that their performance levels haven't really dropped. They haven't had any stinker in comparison to a lot of the other counties, where a lot of the other counties have had at least one very poor performance, whereas to be fair to Armagh, they haven't.
And before we sort of go into this weekend's game, just going back to something you touched on, like 2000, I went to a replay. I was at the drawing game. I remember being up on the hill, and I just remember looking on at Johnny Crowley was back in the day, and sort of the runs that he was making was so varied. But do you feel that you were lucky to get the replay that day because Armagh had decent spells, or what was the feeling? Because as you would know yourself, obviously from the management side of things, they often say whoever learns most from the drawing game usually wins. What was the take? I know it's a good while ago, but
yeah, I think what I remember about those. My memory of the games is just that they were played in really fine days, and there was huge crowds in Croke Park, and there was massive atmosphere. And Armagh, they always do, brought huge colour, and they were some of the most enjoyable games I ever played in, to be honest, because they were physical and they were real football battles. But I think the first day we had, from the top of my head, we started very well, and we had a very good spell for a while, and then Armagh kind of took over for a spell, and it seesawed. But we equalised. We got a free right at the end, where Dennis Dwyer kicked the ball, and as he was kicking it, someone challenged him, and there was a free from where the ball landed, and Maurice Fitz was coming in as a sub that year, and he took the responsibility to kick it over the bar. In the replay then, I can't even remember who equalised to push it to extra time, but I remember in extra time that we felt strong and we got the job done. But it was an incredible experience for our team, because we were a young team at that stage, and while a share of the older lads had won in 97, there was a whole crop of us came through in 2000, where it was our first year kind of establishing ourselves in the team. And it was an incredible experience, and we actually drew the final and it went to replay as well. So we had 2 draws and replays that year, and it was I was brilliant. It was great. Yeah, it was really enjoyable.
The long way to Sam.
The long way to Sam, yeah, which is still shorter than for anyone this season. But anyway.
And like you touched there on Armagh's stay, like my sort of memories of that Armagh team was like Geezer and Aidan O'Rourke with the diagonal ball to Clark and Stevie McDonald and Dermot Marsden. I just can remember seeing that, and Sean O'Sullivan would have done something quite similar with Donaghy. And I was just wondering, like, even moving forward into Andrew Murnan, like I did an article on Andrew last week and sort of his background, like, is that type of player so valuable now with the FRC? Like, will Geezer have been rubbing his hands the fact that he's got a Murnan, or like we use Halva Donaghy? Like, how valuable is somebody like that?
Incredible, because they're so rare in the modern game. There was like even I don't know, even 10 or 15 years ago, a lot of inside forwards would be quite comfortable over their heads, but there's so little ball kicked into them anymore. It's almost like a skill that has gone out of the game. But we've seen bits and pieces of it. But like with Armagh, Andrew Murnan can obviously drift in there, and he's a huge presence and kickouts as well. But he can also then rotate with Rian O'Neill, and Rian O'Neill is quite comfortable going in there. Either of those can be either the supplier or the receiver in that kind of a situation. So that is a thing with Armagh. Look, they've massive variety. There's other times in games you'd see Ben Creeley drifting in there as well, and he'd be an option inside there, or Niall Grimley would have in the past as well. So they've a lot of variety, but they probably don't use it that often. But when they do, it is effective. It's definitely a thing, I think, with Kieran, that as he's gone on and as they've got more successful, he's really data driven, and I don't think he wants to see 5 or 6 of those kicked in a half and 4 of them coming back out the field. He wants 1 or 2 and for them to stick and for something to come off it. So it'll be something. Look, Kerry will be conscious of the next day. And the flip side, David Clifford is very comfortable over his head as well, and he's a good option for ball inside, as is Paul Gainey, if he's fit. Whether he is or not, we don't know yet. So so there's plenty of scope for that, and you would imagine Croke Park will lend to a bit of that over the weekend. And you've the likes of Michael Murphy coming to town as well. So there's plenty of opportunities to try it. Whether teams will or not is another thing.
Like you touched there on Paul Gainey, and like I think he's very, very underrated. But just obviously for people maybe aren't from Kerry, but just mesmerised by the likes of him and Clifford. They always seem to have that little bounce. Like as a defender, you're facing up to somebody and they just do that wee basketball bounce and it gets them out of trouble. Is it the Kerry thing, or maybe are those two boys just standing out because just bring calmness? Does it buy them a wee bit of time because it's effective?
Yeah, I would say David not so much, but Paul Gainey definitely played a good bit of basketball. When he was younger, and his sister Deirdre actually would have played for the Irish team. So they and Aoife, another one of the girls, would have played as well. So they played a good bit of basketball, I'd say, as a family when they were young. So Paul is very skillful. He's very skillful soccer player. He played hurling as well. He's a good hurler. So he's one of those guys that just he is very skillful. And similarly with David, and I think with both of them as well, they're both kind of almost ambidextrous in that they're comfortable using both sides. They're comfortable hopping off their right or left. taking scores off their right or left, and that makes them very, very hard to mark. But as you mentioned, they're great at buying that split second, which you need against some of the best man markers that you can be coming up against.
Was he out hurling with yous? I know you come from hurling background as well. Was that where he was at?
No, he was. Despite my best efforts, Mal himself and Barry Sullivan and Matthew Flaherty would have been another fella. They hurled with Kilmiley, so I tried to get them out. Can't remember again what the link with Kilmiley was. There was some link with Kilmiley anyway, and they ended up hurling with one of our big rivals. So that didn't go down well.
Obviously, David Clifford is household name. Anybody who knows GA knows about him. But like Paddy Clifford, he's obviously very important for what Kerry do. Like, and even the more so that he can turn on to both sides. Does that leave where the ball can go to? Is it more difficult to defend against from the point of view where you put a +1? What does he bring?
Oh, he brings a massive amount, both in terms of, I suppose, before even talking about his football side, in terms of his personality side, because Paddy's he's a warrior, and he's very driven, and he's very determined. He's never beaten. He's a ferocious battler, so he's critical. He really is critical to Kerry in terms of the way that he can grab hold of a game. And he'll never give up. But football-wise, and obviously we've seen more of it this year because probably because of the new rules, and probably because there is a shape with the tree up that you can kick a bit more if you want to. And we're getting to see his skills. But as you said, he's not biased to one side where you know when he's playing centre forward or even drifting into those positions, he's willing to spray the ball to 13, 14 or 15, basically whatever ball is on. Whereas sometimes, particularly right-footed kickers, they can favour, the 13 side, that it opens up for them. And because of that, you mentioned the +1, even if you think back to the 23 All-Ireland final, Brian Howard was constantly cheating back in from 7 in towards 4 to clog up the channels for David Clifford. So that's what Paddy brings, that when he's out there, he brings the other side of the pitch into play as well. So he's hugely important to Kerry. And it was great to see him getting minutes last weekend. I mean, until he got those injuries, he was kind of in player of the year form. He was playing incredible football. And he's been a miss the last couple of weeks, but it's good to see him back. And the flip side of that is the fact he had a couple of weeks off now. He should be really fresh, and he should be really champing for the weekend.
And that leaves Armagh's defensive unit looking at the game differently. Is that in terms of positioning, that shuffle thing that they do left to right? It just leaves it do they nearly need to plan with him or without him? Is it as important as that? Or does Sean O'Shea bring something similar, because I suppose it's all about planning for opposition at times now.
It is. And that for me will be very interesting at the weekend, Mal, because look, Armagh are aware that Kerry are down bodies and they haven't been playing as well as they can be over the last couple of weeks. But they also know that they can lift it, and that there is potential there to play very well, as they did in the league game when they played last March. But I think that is a big question for the weekend, and it's going to be a very interesting one, is that Armagh's zonal defence, that it is, they're obviously not going to change anything because it is highly effective for them. It is working for them. It is hard to break down. But I just wonder, against the best teams, if they have enough ball, will it transfer to Croke Park? And I've made that point before, and it has, I suppose. Like, they beat Dublin in the championship game, but Dublin were seriously wasteful that day. And if Dublin had been a bit more accurate, Armagh probably had it in them maybe to put the foot down a bit as well if there was more pressure on them. But at the same time, Dublin to have 17 wides that day and drop balls short and everything else, it was just so unlike them. But it just showed, I think it was 38 shots they had. So that will be something that I'm sure the Armagh lads will have thought about in the meantime, in terms of not allowing those top teams if a team are getting up towards 38, mid 30s towards the high 40s in terms of shots, it's going to be hard to win that game. So that's going to be hugely interesting. The way Armagh defend, they're very intense. They work really hard for each other. They sprint across, when the ball shifts. They're experts at it, but I'll just be interested to see how it pans out at the weekend, and particularly late in the game, when a bit of fatigue has to set in. Will they be able to keep up the same intensity levels? In terms of Paddy, will they designate someone to man mark him? Possibly. But like you said, then where do you start and stop with that in terms of the likes of David Clifford is going to have to be marked, and do you end up nearly going more man and man then in that situation, and who does that suit? So yeah, they'll have plenty to think about over the last week or two. And I suppose the one thing for Armagh is that they knew, rather than the other three teams that were sitting in the quarter final, they knew that it probably was going to be Kerry, maybe not, but it probably would be. And they've been, I imagine they've been planning since last Monday week, rather than just thinking about things this week.
You touched on something there about, the switching of the play left to right. And there's probably a more general point than this actual game, but is the pinpoint kick pass the way to beat that? Where instead of 3 or 4 hand passes where the team can shuffle, is that what you're looking at now? A number 7 who can just ping it across the pitch. I can't remember who did it in the Donegal game the other day, but it wasn't a hanging pass. It was just on the breadbasket, and within seconds the play was changed.
100%. Yeah, I'm surprised we haven't seen more of that, to be honest, Mal. Because look, you're defending now with 11 as opposed to 14, so there is space, particularly when teams cheat in from the weak side. There is space at the far side, especially if you have wide shape. And Armagh themselves started doing it. They got their first score against Galway. Ethan Rafferty got a 2-pointer. That came from a big switch from Rian O'Neill. He kicked a kind of a 35-yard pass from the 12 position into the centre. Ethan Rafferty ran onto it and kicked a great 2-pointer. And later in the first half, Darragh McMullen got a great 2-pointer as well, where he was kind of wide in the 10 position. Tyrone Kelly got a ball, let's say, not quite in the 12 position, a bit in from it, and he kicked a big 55-yard kick wide to Darragh McMullen. Galway defence started to shift, but they didn't get there in time, and Darragh McMullen was able to get off a relatively uncontested 2-point shot. Sean Kelly was actually in front of him. He could have probably gone at him, but he decided to take the 2-point score. So I think we will see more of that over the next couple of weekends in Croke Park, because again, Croke Park does lend itself to that kind of accurate kicking. So 100%, I think we'll definitely see more of that.
On a sort of a non-tactical side of things, obviously, if Tom O'Sullivan had a bag at the goal chance last year, it could have been a completely different conversation. There would obviously been a lot of hurt in Kerry over the winter, but the stories we're hearing now about like frustration, is that sort of exaggerated, or is there pressure? Like, you've obviously been inside that manager bubble and you've walked in those steps, but is it blown out of proportion, or is there a bit of pressure here?
It's nothing out of the normal, really, Mal. There's always, look,
same every year.
Yeah, it's nothing unusual. The same as, that's all that people talk about down here. And during the league, people will be talking and they'll discuss the result and whatever. But when it comes to championship, it always goes up a few notches, and there will be a loss. And I think more so the performance against Meath was what annoyed everyone. It would have annoyed the players. It would have annoyed the management. It annoyed the supporters, that it just was a complete no-show. And at this stage of the season, people, would have been just frustrated with that. So I think the lads were lucky. They had a game a week later. They were playing at home in Fitzgerald Stadium. They played very well for 2/3 of the game, probably took their foot off the gas a bit in the end and let Cavan back into it. But there was a lot of good signs, not only in the scoring stakes, but in terms of the way they were working for each other. You could see that there was a marked difference from the Meath game, but they'll need to absolutely up that another whatever amount again for next weekend. But yeah, look, where you get a pass in Kerry is when you've won the All-Ireland the year before. If you've won the All-Ireland, there's some small bit of leeway until you're beaten ultimately that season, and then the heat will go up a few notches again. But because of the fact that Kerry were beaten by Armagh last year and lost the All-Ireland the year before, there is going to be a kind of a residual building up of pressure, and any loss then it comes out. So yeah, like, to be honest, nothing new, nothing surprising. I think the lads internally, I don't think they'll be taking any. I'd hope they'll be taking absolutely no notice of it.
They probably don't have time to. They probably don't have time to either.
100%. And if they can go up to Croke Park next Sunday and beat Armagh above there, they're in a fantastic position. And if they can't, they're as well off out of it. They're not going to win the All-Ireland. So, like, to win the All-Ireland, you're going to have to beat Armagh. So I think it's a massive opportunity for them, but they'll be under no illusions whatsoever. They're going to have to be at their absolute best. And at this stage of the championship, if you want to be the team to take Sam Maguire, that's the way it should have to be.
Who do you feel will win? I know you want Kerry to win, but who do you feel will?
Oh, who do I feel?
A really difficult question.
Look, all logic would say that Armagh are in a great position because of the strength of their squad, because of, as I mentioned already, and I think it is a significant point, their performance levels haven't oscillated at all. They've been at their 7, 8, 9 out of 10 the whole time, and yeah, they lost narrowly to Donegal in a fantastic Ulster final. Galway pipped them at the very end in that game, but it wasn't because that they were playing poorly. So you'd have to say that there's a lot in Armagh's favour, but I'd always back Kerry going to Croke Park. I always think a team that have David Clifford and Paddy back in now in it have a great chance. But they're going to have to show a lot more than we've seen so far this summer. Is that possible? It is. Will it happen? I don't know. Diarmuid O'Connor is a big loss, to be fair as well, Mal. He
was in Player of the Year form during the league, like he was.
He was, yeah. And in terms of the new game and everything, he's huge in the air, and it allowed Joe O'Connor to play a certain role then as well. But he is a massive loss, but I see it as a massive opportunity for Kerry. I think the only thing that could catch Armagh as they go further into the championship is that fatigue of trying to get to those levels for a second year in a row, the mental fatigue of that. So I hope that catches up with them on Sundays is what I'd be saying, man.
Brilliant stuff, Éamonn. That's the first of four big games now in Croke Park, and in part two we'll take a dive into some of the rest of them. We'll hear a word from our sponsors, Hastings Hotel.
Experience hospitality the Northwest way at the Everglades Hotel. Located on the banks of the River Foyle, the Everglades Hotel is just minutes from the centre of Derry, Londonderry, with free on-site guest car parking. Whether you're here for a family meal, a big celebration, or simply a peaceful retreat, we'll make your experience as memorable as the sights in the city. Visit Everglades Hotel Derry for accommodation bookings, the latest menus, live shows and events, and much, much more. See you there.
Éamonn, you can now relax. We're not going to be talking about Kerry. It gets it probably gets a wee bit easier now.
No, it's grand. It's fine.
But here, no easier to predict. Like, I'm just looking down here, Tyrone and Dublin. You're immediately thinking a couple of teams where they've been up and down. You're thinking back to that day when Muggsy was throwing dummies in Croke Park. So it's a fixture that brings colour as well.
Oh, it does, and I think for Tyrone this year, they obviously didn't make the quarterfinals last year, kind of surprisingly so, and then the year before, when they got to the quarterfinal stage, they were coming in off a preliminary game, and they were visibly tired really that day against Kerry, whereas this year they're coming in fresh, and they're a Crow Park team. Like, they've Crow Park forwards, they've pace all over the team. A lot of their players are playing well again. So I think at this stage of the season, Malachy O'Rourke will be well used to the squad, and they'll be used to what he's expecting as well. So I'd be expecting a huge performance from Tyrone this weekend. Now, whether or not it'll be enough to beat the Dubs in Crow Park is another thing. But I do think it's another very hard game to call.
Nick, you obviously up close as well with the school scene. Like, Tyrone school structures are very, very strong. Their under 20s are they're always the team to beat at the moment anyway. And like there's that story behind Tyrone, Éamonn, but at the other side of it is the fact that they always seem to be, you touched on it, they always seem to produce top-notch forwards like Stevie O'Neill, Peter Canavan, Muggsy, those types. So you're into Dara Canavan and Darren McCurry. They always seem to have, I'm sure Desi's plan this week is how to limit that space in front of them. Like, they always have a threat. And is that why you label them a Crook Park team, because of that threat, or is there something else?
Yeah, predominantly because of that. And I think you've hit on something there as well, Mal. I think, like, with the Dubs, that their full back line can be porous, and they can come under pressure as they did last weekend against Cork. So I think, to be fair to Dara Canavan, he drove Ergil Kieran to the All-Ireland Club final last year, and there's probably been elements of having had such a long campaign last year at times for Dara this summer, but he's the kind of player that if he catches fire in Crow Park, he could do anything. So I'd be expecting a big performance from the likes of Dara Canavan, and if he's humming, then that brings his team to a different level. So I think that'll be fascinating. Whether they put the likes of a Davy Byrne on him, but with Dara's kind of his jinkiness and his agility, the way that he can dodge around fellas, if he can get enough early ball in particular, I think he could cause a lot of damage. But yeah, as you mentioned, they have a lot of forwards, and even having the likes of, going back to that under 20 team, the likes of Owen McElhone to come in, he's another fella that I could see that, late in the game, if he's coming in when fellas are tiring, he has the confidence and the ability to get scores and to get critical scores. So that battle of the Tyrone forwards and the Dublin backs will be interesting.
You chat about the word battle, Éamonn. What about Brian Kennedy and Big O Coffee Byrne? Like, that would nearly be I don't know, will RTE or whatever need to get the player cam on them, because like they're two, for want of a better term, they're two absolute monsters.
They're two giants, yeah. That will be fascinating, and Patrick O'Cuffig Byrne could have a bit of competition under even the hot balls for the first time in a while, because he's almost like a cheat code in the hot balls. He's so tall, and he's such a reach with his wingspan and everything. But yeah, Brian Kennedy and himself matching up now will be fascinating. And with the way the Dubs have adapted their kick out, Cluxon, obviously he has his favourite go-to to Brian Howard, that when they need to get their hands on something, he watches as to see, can Brian Howard free himself up, and Cluxon will hit him. But a lot of his kickouts now are going to Padro O'Cuffig Byrne, and they've developed a bit of chemistry. So the Armagh model, when Armagh played them in Crow Park a couple of weeks ago, Ben Creeley picked up Padro O'Cuffig Byrne, and he basically broke all of the Dublin kickouts back in, and Armagh devoured those breaks that day. They were, Dublin had a great start in the first 15-20 minutes of that game, but Ben Creeley in particular really spoiled O'Cuffig Byrne in the second half of the first half, and it allowed Armagh to come back into the game when Grugan kicked that massive 2-pointer and did a couple of other great scores. Rian O'Neill got another one. But that was all down to Ben Creeley spoiling Peadar O'Cuffig Byrne, and I could see Tyrone adopting something similar this weekend, where on the Dublin kick-out, Kennedy will be going to break everything back in, and it'll be up to the other Tyrone forwards that are around the place, the likes of Matty Donnelly, Kieran Daly, Shawnee O'Donnell, whoever they have in the half-forward line to kind of pick up those breaking balls then.
Yeah, I remember seeing a statistic flashing up on the screen at one point, and I think it was Dublin had 4 out of 10 kickouts that they won, and that was that spell you're talking about. And like whenever you're chatting about, like, that maybe whenever they're talking this week about breaking the ball, like no better team on the breaks, like McGeary and boys like that. Like they absolutely, like, as you know too well from like Dara O'Shea back in the day, like they were breaking it off him.
100%.
And they went. Is it exactly the same again? History repeating itself?
It is. It'll be the same. Like obviously, if a kick out comes to Brian Kennedy and he feels that he has the ground on O'Cuffig Byrne, he'll be quite happy to go and catch it. But I think in general, you'll see a lot of the two of them horsing each other under the kickouts, and Brian Kennedy trying to get the break and then getting those fellas in under the break. And then it'll be up to the Dubs on the other side. They've good players, the likes of Kilkenny, McGuinness, Sean Bugler. They're all good on breaking ball as well. And they'll be trying to win that breaking ball battle. And then if that's not working, you can be sure Cluxton will be trying to get Brian Howard on kickouts. So whoever's on Brian Howard then will probably have a kind of a tagging job as well to make sure that they're not letting him get free.
Yeah, who do you think they put on Howard? Like, is it because I think in the 10 kickouts Cluxton hit against Kerry in the second half, he was under 4 of them, and that was like it's more than nearly half. So, are you putting huge emphasis in that matchup, or no more than any of the rest of them?
I think there's 2 ways of doing it. I think it can be whoever is nearest to Howard is tagging him, and he has to stay. He has to kind of almost forget about the breaking ball in the initial phase and just tag Howard until the ball is kicked, and then you can go hunting breaking ball. Or the second thing then is to pick someone like a Kieran Daly to just go on him, because he'd be able to match him athletically and he'd be able to match him in the air. Someone like that might be an option, but I would say possibly the former, where whoever's nearest him get a hand on him, and then make sure that he's not getting free, that it's at least a contested kick out, and then if Cluxton decides to go along, that you're obviously abandoning Howard at that stage and you're going for the breaking ball.
Yeah, because like Jim had put Ciaran McColgan 2 weeks in a row, and Aidan O'Shea, and I think it was Kieran Downey, and not many people saw that matchup coming, but he was quick. So that's the type of thing with Howard, as you say, and it's just about making sure that you have somebody that will be with him all the time.
100%. And you can see when Cluxton's trying to hit him, it's like a player taking a free out the field, and you're watching. You want to get a certain player on the ball, and you're just basically waiting until his movement, until he gets a bit of separation and he gets free. And Cluxton does the same thing. He's so accurate. He waits for Howard to get a yard or get 2 yards, and then he'll put it either side of him. So, if you're marking him, it's going to have to be fairly tight, because that accuracy from Cluxton, coupled with the kind of chemistry that they have, it's hard to deal with.
And the final point in this game, and it's probably a major one, like Conor Callaghan, I feel that Desi started him against Derry for the point of view that it would have tied Rodgers up. He probably knew that it would take Rodgers out of midfield. And then from a manager point of view, Éamonn, if somebody's borderline, do you take a gamble, like not play him against Cork, hoping that you get through and you have a fresh week? We don't really know what the story is, actually, but we're just surmising. But is that what Desi may do in a situation like that?
Yeah, I'd say that's what
take a gamble.
It is a gamble, but I suppose I can remember doing it a couple of times. I remember my first year in charge, we played Cavan in the All-Ireland quarter-final, and James O'Donoghue was in a similar situation. He was kind of borderline, and we just left him out. We just chanced it because we wanted him. We knew that it would be Dublin, the semi-final, and we wanted him right for that. We didn't want to take the risk, and it paid off. But it's those calls. It's great when you win, but obviously, if Dublin had been beaten the last day, there would have been question marks over Desi then, and why did he take the risk, and was he not respecting Cork enough and everything else? But look, I think with Con, the night of the Derry game, there could be something in the Rogers point, but I think as well there was a possibility that they could go out that night, and it was an away from Croke Park game, and there was a lot of factors, and I'd say he just felt he possibly needed Con's leadership, and Con played well, but you could see that he was still playing within himself, that he wasn't sprinting flat out or anything like that. So he's had another couple of weeks, so I'd expect him to be fine for this weekend. And again, this is a situation now where it's season over stuff if you lose, and Desi know that with Tyrone coming to town, he'll need everyone. So I'd say if Con is anywhere towards 70-80% fit, he'll be starting the next day.
Do you feel the Dubs go through, or Tyrone? As I said earlier, the two teams sort of with not massive levels of consistency, but who do you feel will come through? It's again a very tough question.
It is. I think in all of the games this weekend, to be honest, there's room for shocks, or there's room for either team. There's a case for either team winning. And look, Dublin, I think the fact that the last time they were in Croke Park, they competed reasonably well with Armagh, but they kicked the game away in effect. I think that there's something ominous about them. If Con is back fit, and the fact that that they have got the likes of Lee Gannon back, John Small has a couple of games under his belt now. Luke Brannock has shown a bit of form. Paddy Small was obviously very good the last day. And then they have the old reliables, the likes of, Clucks and Howard, Kilkenny, and Con to drive them on. It's hard to look beyond them, but again, I wouldn't be one bit surprised. And if those Tyrone forwards, and in particular Derek Hanavan, catches fire, I could see Tyrone winning. So hard to call it, Mel. Hard to call it. There'll be no one rushing to the bookies, I'd say, after listening to this podcast anyway, in terms of going one way or the other.
I will be rushing anyway, but I'm really looking forward to it. It's just, I think that's what, as we says earlier in the conversation, things are just starting to heat up now. And the final game, by no means least, you have Donegal and Monaghan. Donegal beat them by 2 points in the Ulster Championship. Much significance in that, do you feel? Or, is it too far away to make comparisons, or what way do you find that?
Yeah, I think it is probably too far back, but I have a distinct memory of that game that Gabriel Bannigan was frustrated with Monaghan themselves afterwards for their first half showing that night. They were 6 points down at half time. They hadn't played the way that they had been playing in terms of pressing hard all over the field, playing with that high energy that they have been playing for the rest of the season, which they did play with in the second half, and they pushed Donegal all the way. So I expect to see that from Monaghan from the off this weekend, and I think they can make Donegal really uncomfortable by doing that. So I think that'll be the reference point for Monaghan, that when they played the way they can play in the second half, that they won the second half by 4 points. So they'll be looking to do something similar. And the other memory I have of that game is that Donegal were so disciplined at the back that they gave Rory Beggan no, certain, maybe not. I think no.
I think he scored a 45. Might have been
45. Yeah,
I think so. I think, or something.
Yeah.
If not, if it was 1 free at most.
Yeah. So there was no. So obviously his free taking and his 2 point free taking has been a big factor for Monaghan. So that was hugely impressive from Donegal that day. So I think they're the kind of lessons. But since then, I mean, Monaghan have been 100% in their group. They've put up huge scores. They're playing with serious confidence and energy. And Donegal then on the other side, they've been getting the job done, but they've had to go the longer route, which wouldn't have suited them considering that they started off in the Ulster preliminary round this year, and they're facing into the third week in a row, and there has been a look of a bit of fatigue about them over the last couple of weekends. So you really have an example here of a team that are fresh and bouncing off the ground, coming against one of the favourites for the All-Ireland, but who look slightly vulnerable, possibly because of fatigue.
And obviously the fact they've got a Saturday game versus Sunday, there's a lot of talk about that. But are they lucky in the fact that the Louth game was possibly done and dusted with Kieran Thompson's goal? Like, if they had a finish like Galway or like the way they finished against Mayo, like I'm tapping into your managerial hat here. Like, is there a difference in how long it takes to come down from that game in the Hyde versus the other day, or not? Mentally?
I don't think so. I think to be fair to Donegal, I don't understand how the decisions are made. I imagine the Kerry Armagh game was regarded as the biggest game of the weekend, so that was given the kind of 4 o'clock slot on the Sunday. But why Donegal were in the situation of the 6 days, and you have teams with 8 days and 7 days and all of that, particularly with all the games, I can see their case. The other side of it then is that if you're being harsh, you're saying that's the point that Kieran McGeeney always made about this structure, is that every game counts and every game is significant, because if you lose, as Donegal did, you do end up in this situation. I think for them, the fact that it's a 6-day turnaround, the fact, similar to ourselves, and we're traveling from here, it's a big journey on the day before the game. They'll be traveling on Friday. I imagine it means they'll probably only meet up once this week, possibly for a Wednesday night session. I imagine that's what it means for them, because they'll be together again above in Dublin on Friday evening to chat through a few bits, and if they want to go through walkthroughs and all that. But for me, certainly this week, it's about recovery, and more mental recovery than physical recovery, that the players can just have a bit of downtime, possibly away from even thinking too much about it. Even in terms of the amount of video analysis and whatever they'll have to do in Monaghan, probably wouldn't be as big as a team that they haven't played already this season. They've only played them a couple of, maybe 2 months ago. So, they know them quite well. But it is obviously a tricky one. But ultimately, again, if you want to win the All-Ireland, these are the kind of challenges you're going to have to come through. And it'll be interesting to see if Donegal do use Michael Murphy a bit closer to goals this weekend, and do test him out inside there the odd time, just in terms of giving themselves something different, and even something from a less kind of demanding physically game where they're constantly having to get up and down the pitch. So it'd be interesting to see a bit of that. But hugely interesting game again.
Yeah, because I think I had asked Jim the question, was Jason McGee been taken off a tactical substitution, or what was the thought? Because I think he hadn't played a full game of football. I can't remember the time scale, just for one reason or another, but he did say that he was never going to play any more than 35 minutes. And then like Hugh McFadden was on an immense performance in the second half. So maybe it's a case of having one of them for half. And as you say, like if Murphy's closer to goal, does that change Rory Beggin's mindset as to how many times you leave the goal square? Is there something in that as well?
It possibly is, and wouldn't it be interesting if he was going in behind him for kickouts to test him out as he's entitled to do? But no one seems to.
We haven't saw that yet at all. No, I don't. Yeah.
No. And Ben O'Carroll did it a couple of times for Roscommon. In the earlier, I think he might have done it against Galway, but they didn't win the resulting kick out, so they didn't have an opportunity to put it inside straight away. But it possibly does. It possibly does. The fact that Monaghan have so many 2-point shooters from outside as well, then does that mean that Dublin or Donegal have to slightly change the way that they sit in so deep defensively? as well, that there could be opportunities, for twos from outside for the Monaghan lads. So that'll be another discussion point in the Donegal camp this weekend, or this week, in the lead into the weekend.
And from the point of view of Sean Patton, like, Down did really well in his kick out that day in Clonus. I think obviously the goal was the time where a defender caught behind Oisín Gallen that led to the goal, but by and large, they seem to always have a babysitter at the back all the time. And I'm thinking back to the Louth game where when they sat off him, Finbar Rorty made up the ground to create the goal chance that Gallen missed. And then when they pushed up on him, it was the ball over the top to Murphy that led to Conor Donald's goal. And that was probably the case study as both sides of Patton. But did Down show a way that Monaghan could follow, if that makes sense?
They did. And to be fair to Down, I've mentioned it before, like they've had an outstanding championship. I know they're very disappointed this week. But I think they showed what's possible from the position of winning a Tailteann Cup in terms of the way that they've performed this season. It's been fantastic. It's a pity they didn't hold on to their status in Division 2 from the point of view of building next year. But I thought Conor Laverty's comments after the game on Sunday were very interesting in terms of looking at the way that Kieran McGeeney stuck at it in Armagh, the way that he built that thing from the ground up, and that Conor Laverty is looking at it similarly in Down. So that's only positive from Down. But we have seen, of all the teams, we have seen innovations like that when you mentioned, like they're on their own kick out as well from Down and signs on. They were very close to getting into a quarter final. Patton, the thing with him, I was at the game in Hyde Park against Mayo, and there was one in the second half. It led to the McBrearty goal chance that Reap kind of sprinted back and stopped. But that was an absolute missile over the top. And that's the danger for any team, that if you go too aggressively after him, that they are very good at it, and Murphy's very good at getting the flick on or winning it and shipping it straight away. It's funny sometimes, I think, with Patton, the ones that he can lose concentration on and the ones that you can maybe get a few off are the short to medium ones. It's almost like they're too easy for him and he doesn't take as much care with them or something. Again, with Monaghan, the fact that they've played them already, and you have two keepers at either side who have huge range in their kicks, it'll be very interesting to see what they come up with.
And the final point in this game was that day in Clonus, Peadar Mogan seemed to cheat up that wing. He seemed to wait at the halfway line, and because I was only watching on TV, it was difficult to see. It was nearly as if he just waited until Donegal had three more players back, and away he went. And he seemed to take on Stephen O'Hanlon on that wing. And even in the first half, I think he was in the scoring zone, that wee pocket 2 or 3 times. Monaghan probably have to take from that they can't really afford Donegal's runners. If you look at last weekend, McColgan, Moore, Rorty, easier said than done, obviously, but they need to address that.
They do, and in fairness to Donegal, going right back earlier on in the Ulster Championship, they're very good at that, of using the 3-up rule, where they get a player back in the far side to release a guy to go, and sometimes his man can't go because he's one of the 3-up, and that the opposition aren't haven't cottoned onto it. So as you said, Peadar Mogan was doing it that day. Sometimes they keep an extra back in position, in terms of, rather than keeping 4 back, they keep 5 back, and someone comes late and joins the attack, and they can almost sneak in and get in for a score. So they have a lot of little tricks like that up their sleeves, particularly when it comes to running. And Mogan is very good at getting free and driving forward and getting a couple of scores every game. And as we said, Kieran Moore has been outstanding in the last couple of weeks, and they'll need his legs and energy in Croke Park at the weekend. But you mentioned about the Ulster Championship game earlier on. It is those little details that Monaghan will have learned from that game. So it'll be telling now to see at the weekend how they deal with it, and I presume they'll have plans. But sometimes it's fine having plans when you're coming up against a team as well drilled and that have practiced the thing as often as they have. It can be can be hard to disrupt it on the first attempt.
Who do you feel will win, or could we potentially have a third penalty shootout? Maybe. Who knows? We haven't had one yet, but who do you feel is favourites here?
Speaking of bets earlier on, that would be a good bet. That was one of the games to go to penalties over the weekend, because there is a big chance. I'd be a bit worried for Donegal, Mal. I just think that they are a bit fatigued. I think Croke Park is either going to make or break them. The years that they've done well when they won the All-Ireland, Croke Park absolutely suited their game, and they brought it to another level when they got to Croke Park. If they can do that this weekend, they will take a lot of stopping. But I just think that Monaghan have been playing with serious confidence. They're fresh. I think the way they play in terms of pressing out will make Donegal uncomfortable. And the fact of having all those 2-point shooters against the zonal defence could be significant. So I give Monaghan a great shout. I think could depend on which Donegal turns up, but I definitely give Monaghan a great shout in this game.
Another a third game where it's nearly impossible to call, and the final game, we won't go into too much detail because we're obviously an Ulster-based podcast, but Galway, they've been in a couple of finals, they've been very close. They're up against the Meath team that you touched on, the Talton Cup. They had won it recently as well. You know, in a short couple of lanes, who do you feel comes through here?
It's similar to that other game, Mal. I think that Meath, like, they've beaten Kerry and Dublin, and any team that's beaten Kerry and Dublin, the championship deserves to be treated very seriously. They've probably been unlucky with a couple of the injuries that they've had to bigger players. For their sake, you'll be hoping the likes of Matthew Costello will make it back this weekend. Galway have found a bit of form over the last couple of weeks, and particularly up front, the likes of Shane Welch, Rob Finnerty, Matthew Thompson. Shane Welch obviously is a bit of an injury doubt. They're playing great stuff. Again, like, it's Killian McDade is back into his best again. Sean Kelly is playing well. They've big men around the middle. They're probably undecided about their goalkeeper, which isn't ideal at this stage of the championship.
And I think they were going to bring Gleeson on, or he was warming up apparently during that game. I wasn't at it, but
yeah, they looked, I think, twice. They kind of were about to bring him on, and then they held him because they felt he'd have had a longer kick into the wind in the second half when Flaherty was under pressure. So again, it's a hugely difficult one to call. I think what Meath have been excellent at this year, and particularly against teams that would be ranked higher than them, has been winning the midfield battle, winning it in the air and winning it on the ground. They're outstanding at breaking ball. And it could come down to that, because both sets of forwards are very lively and are well capable of putting up big scores. But both Kerry and Dublin found out to their cost that if Meath get on top of you in the middle of the field, you're in trouble. So Galway possibly have the personnel to match them there. So because of that, I give Galway maybe a bare nod. But again, extra time, penalties, the works, wouldn't be a bit surprised. Or indeed, if Meath were to win, wouldn't be a bit surprised. And I do think they deserve massive credit, Meath, because when you think of where they were facing into their first championship game against Carlow, where the two coaches had left and there was a lot of uncertainty around the group and everything else, to be now in an All-Ireland quarter-final in a 50-50 game, playing great football. They deserve, Robbie Brennan and Conor Gillespie and all of their crew deserve massive credit, as do the players.
There you have it. 4 massive games, 8 teams left, and we still don't have a massive idea who the last 4 are going to be. So that's exactly the way you would want it in an All-Ireland quarter-final weekend. Éamonn, thanks a million for your time and insights and all the rest. And I'll bump into you over the weekend. And again, as I say, for listeners, you can check back in on Monday. We'll have a reaction show and analysis show to see who the last 4 are in the race for Sam. So check us out on Monday in GaelicLife.com. Éamonn, thanks a million for your time.
You're welcome, Matt. No problem.